Israel?
That's half of a very important question. The other half of it is, what's the effect of war and terrorism on the Palestinians? Now, if you take a look at, we're not supposed to talk about that question here, but if you look at them both, you'll find that what Benny Morris described is in fact correct. The balance of terror and violence is overwhelmingly against the Palestinians, not surprisingly, given the balance of forces. And that's even true, that's true right to the present. I mean, for decades, Israel was able to run the West Bank virtually with no forces, as Morris and others point out, because the population was so passive. While they were being humiliated, beaten, tortured, land stolen, and so on, just as I quoted. Finally, there was a reaction. And it's interesting to see the U.S. reaction to it. In the first month of the Intifada, this one, October 2000, in the first month of the Intifada, 74 Palestinians were killed, 4 Israelis were killed. It's all in the occupied territories. The Israeli army, according to its own records, fired 1 million bullets in the first day, which disgusted the generals when they learned about it. Israel, the first few days of the Intifada, was using U.S. helicopters, they don't make them, U.S. helicopters to attack civilian complexes, apartment houses and so on, killing and wounding dozens of people. And the U.S. did respond to that. Clinton responded by sending the biggest shipment of military helicopters in a decade to Israel. The press responded too by not publishing it. I should add, refusing to publish it because it was repeatedly brought to their attention. Well, while the ratio was 20-1, which is pretty much what it's been for a long time, there was no concern here. Then over the next 2-3 years, the ratio reduced to closer to 3-1. And then came enormous concern about the 1, not the 3. And this goes back for a long time. What I quoted from Morris is accurate.
Well,
no follow-up, just a very brief response.
The idea that there is this vast conspiracy between the American media and both Democrats like Clinton and Republicans like Bush to hide the truth from the American public just does not bear reality. Israel's an open society. Any newspaper can come and cover it. Why would not the newspapers cover these stories? Well, for one reason, they are figments of Chomsky's imagination.
Well, then
and they're just never happened. Now, I want to talk about another figment of his imagination. Chomsky constantly quotes...
My friend is a young Afghan-American woman who is still in high school and has chosen not to live her life here. Instead, she's chosen to earn a degree in teaching and move to Afghanistan to reach and help Afghan children. What advice would you offer her? Specifically, what can she do to be most effective and protect herself as a woman? I mean, she knows, I'm sure, without knowing her, she knows 100 times as much about this topic as I do, so I wouldn't offer her any advice. I would offer ourselves advice. We have a responsibility to Afghanistan. The United States and Russia, those two countries, destroyed Afghanistan. In the last 20 years, the two countries have destroyed Afghanistan. We shouldn't be giving them aid. We should be paying them reparations. We should be honest enough to do that. It's not the only country in the world to which we owe reparations, but it's one. And the way we could assist this young Afghan woman is by doing the kind of thing that she and others like her would ask us to do. And we should follow their lead. We don't have anything to tell them. Again, a choice, not a necessity. So we end up with kind of a dilemma. If we're not honest, forget it. If we are honest, there's a dilemma. One possibility is just to acknowledge that we are total hypocrites, and then to at least have the decency to stop talking about things like human rights and right and wrong and good and evil and so on, and just say, yeah, we're hypocrites. We have force, and we're going to rule the world by force. Period. Let's forget about everything else. The other option is harder to pursue, but it's imperative, unless we would like to contribute to still worse disasters that are likely to lie ahead. industrial civilization has developed within a certain system of convenient myths. The driving force of modern industrial civilization has been individual material gain, which is accepted as legitimate, even praiseworthy, on the grounds that private vices yield public benefits in the classic formulation. Now, it's long been understood very well that a society that is based on this principle will destroy itself in time. It can only persist with whatever suffering and injustice it entails, as long as it's possible to pretend that the destructive forces that humans create are limited, that the world is an infinite resource, and that the world is an infinite garbage can. At this stage of history, either one of two things is possible. Either the general population will take control of its own destiny and will concern itself with community interests, guided by values of solidarity and sympathy and concern for others, or alternatively, there will be no destiny for anyone to control. As long as some specialized class is in a position of authority, it is going to set policy in the special interests that it serves. But the conditions of survival, let alone justice, require rational social planning in the interests of the community as a whole, and by now that means the global community. The question is whether privileged elites should dominate mass communication and should use this power as they tell us they must, namely to impose necessary illusions, to manipulate and deceive the stupid majority and remove them from the public arena. The question in brief is whether democracy and freedom are values to be preserved or threats to be avoided. In this possibly terminal phase of human existence, democracy and freedom are more than values to be treasured. They may well be essential to survival.
Join me in welcoming a man who has brought us all closer to the unapproachable goddess of truth, Dr. Noam Chomsky.
Friend of mine who thinks that correctly that evolutionary psychology and sociobiology is a pile of junk, once gave an argument to prove that there was natural selection for stupidity and passivity. And the argument runs like this. He says, imagine a bunch of hunter-gatherers sitting around a fire and somebody hears a saber-toothed tiger screaming outside. And most of them huddle around the fire, but one of them's kind of energetic and enthusiastic and smart and so on. So he figures he'll go out and, drive the saber-toothed tiger away. Well, the chances of the other people's genes being perpetuated is fairly high, but the chances of his genes being perpetuated are rather low. So it's obvious that selection is going to lead to stupidity and passivity and so on. So it's just as good an argument as any other one, namely zero. But the fact is that answers your question, really. It's easier just to listen to something and sort of feel good and then go home and do something else. You want to try to go on and do something more, yeah, it takes effort and maybe cost. And in the long term, it'll make a better world, but that's for everybody, not just for you. The constructive ways begin with an honest look in the mirror, never an easy task, always a necessary one.